Welcome back
to Kind of Culture. I'm Andy. This is Pastor Mark. I'm
going to try and behave myself.
You
bring out the worst.
You should definitely not. That is the greatest compliment. You bring out the worst in me.
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay.
Isaiah.
Yes.
Chapter 44.
Yes.
A couple things in this, but I want you to read verses 1 through 5 for me. You can read it, sing it, do however you would like to do it.
But now listen, O Jacob, my servant Israel, whom I have chosen. This is what the Lord says. He who made you, who formed you in the womb, and who will help you. Do not be afraid, O Jacob, my servant. Jeshurun, whom I have chosen. For I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. They will spring up like grass in a meadow, like poplar trees by flowering streams. One will say, I belong to the Lord. Another will call himself by the name of Jacob. Still another will write on his hand the Lord's, and will take the name of Israel.
So looking at this section and thinking about this counter-culturally, right? We were just talking about it, this morning. There's a lot of things to look at and to fear. There's a lot of things to look at and get nervous about, to really get afraid of, right?
Scared and
afraid.
Okay.
Right? There's a whole bunch of things that, again, the way that our culture is, this vast river that just flows and takes everybody with it, right? Everybody goes along with what everybody's saying, right? But this counterculture idea of how do we live in the time that we're living in, right? And we talk whether it's financially, whether we talk about physical things, right? We haven't really mentioned it down here very much, but last week the reports of leprosy making its return to Florida,
which is known as Hansen's disease. Unlike the Hansen's disease that you have from being infected by me,
so you
by my.
Now I want to preach that. I have Hansen's disease.
I always joke in my church that they suffer from Hansen's disease. Putting up with me all the time.
I've noticed that there's been some effects.
Yes, I have different effects on different people.
How do we counterculturalize this whole idea of fear, right? How do we look at what's going around us? Try to understand it, seek wisdom about it, right? But not live in fear of all of these things. And this is a common topic that we talk about down here because this is what I deal with on a regular basis. People come in and they're afraid. They're afraid, and that afraidness brings about actions and words, right? And I think we've seen an uptick of that within the church, right? Mm-hmm. People just acting more fearful in nature. Mm-hmm. How do we counterculturalize that? Fix it for me.
Fix it for you. Well, the verse that's coming to my mind is, "He will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee."
Yep.
I learned it from the King James, so I'll just use that. Dale Kiefer would be happy.
He would be.
It's what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
I have to keep my eyes on the Lord.
Yep.
And I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. So you go back. Is it Issachar? We don't know what to do, God, but our trust is in you. There's a lot of this stuff. We just had a conversation earlier about it. There's stuff that goes on that I talk about. That I think about, and for me sometimes it's I'm a little bit older now. I'm older than I was last year, and if I live long enough, I'll
be older still.
But I'm getting to the place now where I'm like, okay, will I make it to retirement? Will I get to retire? It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This is the thing that and all this stuff doesn't really matter if we're in a right relationship with Christ.
So how do
my prayer to God is, Lord, help me be faithful to the end, whether it's my end, I die in the next few minutes, or whether it's Christ coming back and establishing his kingdom, whether it's persecution, whether it's some entity that just says, oh, this guy, we're going to take him out. help me be faithful to the end, Lord. And I've got to keep my eyes on him. There's two scenes in the Chosen that just really speak. One, and I'm preaching through this a little bit now, not through the Chosen, but through the calling of Nathaniel.
Right.
And I can't get over the scene when I see it on YouTube. It comes across there, and I just am drawn to it. And there's a scene, they do a wonderful job where Nathaniel looks over at Philip and says, "What did you tell him?" And he's getting more and more where he's getting freaked out because Jesus knows all these things about him. And Jesus says, "Don't look at him, look at me."
Mm-hmm.
And then he says that to Peter when Peter's getting ready to walk on water. And Jesus reiterates him, "Keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes on me."
Yep.
In the Shack movie, he says the same thing when there's a scene when the main character is in a boat and it's being swamped with black water, and it's his dark thoughts and all this stuff. And Jesus walking to him, he says, "Keep your eyes on me. Keep your eyes." That is the only thing I can tell you, Andy.
Yeah.
Is I have got to keep my eyes on the Lord.
How do we? Because I love what you just said there, but how do we cultivate within our own minds this idea of, does it matter anyway, right? In the realm of life, like all these things that I'm fearing, all these things that I'm looking forward to. We were talking about 401ks a few minutes ago and those kind of things, right? How can we cultivate within our thing? Like, man, listen, the ultimate goal is to be with Jesus.
Right.
It's not about whether I ever get to use my 401k.
Yes.
Right? Like, if I get to be with Jesus forever and I lose my 401k, I think
I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, there's
right.
no U-Hauls behind a hearse. All our good stuff. I've seen this over and over again. Antique malls, flea markets, garage sales, landfills are filled with stuff that no one wants. There's a meme I saw on Facebook. This lady from she says she's like about my age, and she's like, "All this will be yours someday," and it's all this Avon stuff and all these tchotchkes she's accumulated, and the kids are like, "Ah, I don't want all that stuff,"
It's so funny because Timothy and I have had that discussion, right? Like he would be interested in my sword collection, keeping that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to my books, he's like, "Dad, I'm probably not going to build onto my house just so I can keep your books," right? Like that's just not going to probably be. Yep. And again, he said there are some books that I would want. There are other books I wouldn't want. Well, guess what? Everybody who comes down here to the center and sees my books is like, I would never read these ones or these ones or these. Like everybody's like that. They would throw.
But I would
out.
not say that because I would not say these ones.
Right.
That would be really bad English.
I love my English, right? But again, how do we cultivate this whole thing like within our people? Saying like, listen, you've got to have a mindset of, in the realm of life, does this really matter?
Yeah, and there is the argument about Western Christianity is a pretty powerless, weak Christianity in many cases, because we want one foot in the world and one foot in the we want fire insurance is all we want.
Yeah,
but when it comes to Jesus saying, I want you.
Yeah.
That is too much for people sometimes. This, I had a Nazarene missionary tell me one time. It was at my church, and he said, "Mark, if you preach holiness, he goes, you will not get, your church will not grow. It will decline because people will say this teaching is too hard for me."
Yep.
And I have, in some cases, I have found that to be true. They say, "Wait a minute, living a holy life. How do I do that? Surrendering, or this one, submission. Wait, you want me to submit? Yes. You will not regret it."
Submission. It's funny because all of those things you just mentioned, right? Most people would say that they're submissive.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm very submissive.
Yeah, I'll do what God wants me to do until it's what I don't want to do.
Right. God has to take my suggestions.
Yes.
As law.
Yes.
But I'll be submissive.
I'll tell you how I want it done.
That's exactly right. Right. It's about a different mindset, isn't it? Like we have to think differently.
To have the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
And to the mind set on Christ. Which Jesus said, set your mind on heavenly things, not on earthly things, which will burn up and turn to chaff. Yeah. It's just going to happen. Even when we go, I love history and I love going to historic places. But I know over and over again they'll say this is a recreation. This was a recreation.
Yeah.
Because the old stuff has just fallen apart. It's not meant to last. So what is the stuff that lasts?
Yeah. Yep. And really,
What is the stuff that lasts? The legacy that we want to leave behind. Oh, we're supposed to leave an inheritance. I see that. I just saw something. Oh, we're supposed to leave an inheritance. That's great. But the inheritance that many people think that they identify that with is a financial inheritance.
Yeah.
I hope that I leave a spiritual inheritance. More, that's somewhere down the road. Someone 3 generations from now is going to say, "Well, how did you come to Christ?" Well, because my dad. And then how did your dad? Well, because his dad. How did your dad? Well, he knew this guy in Jamestown, New York, who led him to the Lord, and whatever.
Well, let's leave it right there.
Leave it there.
I don't want to do
mic drop. Is that a mic drop? Is that what they call a mic drop?
But I want to pick back up the mic.
Okay.
Next time, because this whole idea about spiritual inheritance is definitely counterculture-ish.
Yeah.
Right? And so maybe I'll give you like 3 seconds to be thinking, like, what exactly does that mean? When you say you want to leave a spiritual inheritance, what exactly does that mean? Because you know what? People work their whole lives so that they can leave an inheritance. And they have an idea of what that looks like, what they want to, I want to leave my kids this.
Yeah.
Well, for a spiritual inheritance, is it my room of books out there? Is that my spiritual inheritance to my kid? But think about that, and we will be back again next time, right here.
Grace and peace.
Counterculture.